everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to So What, the Marketing Analytics and Insights live show. I am Katie, joined by Chris and John, who cannot high five this week. They would sort of do a,
That's
yeah,
weird.
almost.
That's weird.
This week, we are talking about using generative AI to build marketing plans. So, we've been talking a lot internally. Generative AI is a cool tool, but that's really what it is at the end of the day. It's just part of your tech stack. And you still have things as a marketer that you need to do, like build marketing plans, figure out, who your audience is, how are we going to sell this thing. And so today what we want to do is walk through how to use generative AI to process technical documents to produce useful marketing plan. There's a lot of documentation that's come out recently that we want to focus on. A prompting process to develop your own marketing plan from any document. And so we'll give some examples of documents, but there's other documents that may be more suited to you and your industry. And an analysis of the Google SEO leak and LinkedIn's algorithm with recommendations. And so Chris is going to get into what the Google SEO leak and LinkedIn is. So Chris, where would you like to start this week?
Let's talk about the Google leak and stuff, because I know we teased it in a couple of the different Slack groups and things. For folks who are not aware, over this past weekend, it's weird being here. I've been on the show in a couple of weeks now. Over the past weekend, Rand Fishkin over at SparkToro, who many folks remember from his days, he was the founder of Moz. Someone got in touch with him saying, hey, there's been this massive leak of Google's internal API documentation. So what was leaked was thousands of pages of data about Google's content warehouse. So to summarize a lot of stuff, Google has sort of this monolithic, massive data processing system that controls what it ingests, how it processes it, and then how it makes it available to different systems at Google, like Google Search. And Rand's article just touched on essentially, the sort of the surface level stuff in this, and some of the things that he in particular was a little appropriately incensed by, because he had been making claims for years, for example, saying like, yeah, Google clearly seems to take into account click behavior. And Google's like, no, we don't take into account any click behavior at all. And then this documentation leaks, and very clearly in the system says, hey, we take into account click behavior. That combined with some testimony from the lawsuit, the Department of Justice lawsuit, Google's like, yeah, actually, we do take into account click behavior.
So let's back up a little bit. So Google went through a major overhaul a couple of years ago in terms of what we as marketers understand the algorithm to do. And I believe there were three major things that we were advising marketers to pay attention to in terms of how to rank better in search results. And that was what the helpfulness of the content, the relevancy of the content, and what was the third one?
Helpfulness, relevance, and freshness.
Freshness. And this is because the public facing documentation that we all collectively had, that's what we were told by Google. That's all that matters. You don't have to worry about anything else. Everything else that you are, on your plate, forget it. It doesn't matter. Just focus on those three things and you'll be fine. Like, that's what we've been told. That's the Kool-Aid we've been drinking for the past couple of years. And so, understandably, Rand and the rest of us should be incensed because we've been doing the wrong things. We've been spending money with Google. They've been taking our money and we're not even doing it right. So they set us up for failure. This is a big deal.
This is a big deal. And so Rand did a great job sort of summarizing it. Mike King over at iPoll Rank has a much longer analysis of some of the surface level stuff. However, you can go out on the internet over Hexdocs, which is a site that makes archival copies of GitHub repositories, and you can look at this leaked content yourself. Here's the challenge. It's over 1 million words long, 2,500 pages of stuff. Just the summary page here is 200,000 words long. So all of the analysis that folks have been doing has really only started to scratch the surface of the of all these different implications. And so what I thought we would do today is something I did over the weekend once I found this repository. I'm like, oh, this is a great use case to use generative AI because A, it can read the whole document, and B, it can connect the dots in ways that you and I can't because we just can't keep that much text in our heads. So I figured we might do a little bit of an exploration of that today, but I wanted to, first give full credit where it's due. Rand did a great write-up. Mike King did a great write-up, and their conclusions do support a lot of the big, I guess, headline things like the age of your domain does matter.
Mhm.
You are put in a sandbox for 18 months. So if you go out and buy a whole bunch of new domains, it's going to take 18 months for them to start ranking. So any questions before we dig in, Katie?
So many questions. I guess the big question, and this might be just, speculation on our side, and John, I would love to get your perspective on this as well, is why would Google lie to us? I mean, I'm sure the easy answer is money, but why would they lie to us about this?
Yeah, there's a whole kind of wave of stuff that I'd seen kick off about a year and a half ago where people just realized that it's cheaper for Google to just have their PR team say, well, this is how the thing works. It does X, Y, and Z. And it's cheaper to have the PR team do that than actually, get developers to make the algorithm do that for it to be real. It's cheaper to just spin a story and let people believe it. And so, yeah, there's been a lot of, because in a bunch of these SEO groups that I've been in, like they're on dark social, the rest of the world can't see them, but they're like, oh, hey, look, I tried putting some white text on a white background and my page still got indexed and it got in there. And all these things that for years Google has been saying, yeah, no, it doesn't do this. Actually, it does do some of that stuff. Another big one is having mechanical Turks, people who spend their whole day like going through websites and rating them as to what they can do. Supposedly there was none of that, but these guys have seen that. They even got an employee in to do it and do the page ranking. And he said, look, if you get your site optimized for the 20 things that these people look for, your rankings will improve regardless of any algorithmic stuff. So yeah, you nailed it. It's, follow the money and you get there.
Yeah, it's money, and it's also the black hat stuff. If people know how the system works, they can game it.
Okay. All right.
All right.
Let's move on.
So let's get started. The first thing we're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to the HexDocs repository. Yeah, I had to Google for it, but if you just Google for Google API Content Warehouse hexdocs.pm, you'll be able to find the repository. As with any API documentation, it's broken up into two portions. One is sort of the broad descriptions, two are the individual modules. And there is no way to make this any bigger because it's just so convoluted. However, if you scroll down all the way down to the bottom, you can actually download an EPUB, an ebook version of this if you want to have a reference. And I actually have done that because I wanted to. What you would do next is just in very straightforward, old school, old fashioned. Take this whole page, copy it, and paste it into a text document. That's going to be the easy way to get a hold of this. This API summary page tells you what all the modules are and what their functions are, what they do, and this is all code stuff. So, to give a bit more insight, Google has built essentially a massive system of internal APIs that all connect to and from this content warehouse. And so what was leaked was the documentation that Google employees use internally to remember how the heck to talk to their own systems. So internal developers at Google would reference this documentation to plug things into it or to extract information out of it.
Okay.
So let's go over to the irony.
Google.
Let's go to Google Gemini.
Oof, I'm feeling some irony. I'm feeling a little uneasy about this.
Exactly. And the reason we're using Gemini is because of its context window. It has a short-term memory of 1 million tokens, which you can see here in the corner, which is about 700,000 words. Anthropic's Claude 3 has a context window similar. ChatGPT's context window, I believe, is still only 128,000, so it's 90,000 words. So it can't handle nearly as much information. I'm going to switch the model.
What are the odds? So you're using Google Content Warehouse, Google Gemini, with Google leaked documentation. What are the odds that the generative AI system is going to be like, oops, that information doesn't exist, and delete it right there on the spot, like just from your looking window. And it's going to be like, you didn't put anything in here. You were
It's
imagining the whole thing.
funny you say that. Because in regular Gemini, I tried to load the web page, and the first thing it spit up was, when I tried to run it, was, I'm a text-based AI. I don't know how to do that. Even though Gemini can clearly read other pages, it took several tries just to even get it to partially look at the page, and it still won't. So the consumer version says, I'm not programmed to assist with that. I can't help you with that. I guess you
That
can.
is exactly what I thought was going to happen. That is,
Uh-huh.
it's what
However,
it makes sense. Like they're probably pooping themselves right now. Like, oh my God, this is awful. This looks really bad for us.
yes. However, AI Studio is a separate interface with a separate set of systems. I'm going
Okay.
to switch the model from Flash to Pro because Flash is dumb as a bag of hammers. It's good for summarization. It's not really good for the more deep analysis. And as I always do with Gemini, in development, big warning, development, I turn the safeties off. If you're using this code in production, please do not do this. This is an unsafe practice. The first thing we do always is we prime the model, right? So we say we're going to examine the API's documentation. So what are the best practices for reading through an API, right? We want to get Gemini to load an understanding of how to think about APIs. This is important so that as we feed it actual API documentation, it will know what to look for.
Okay.
Okay, so, and if you are unfamiliar with this step, we have, where did I put it? We have a download, a free download with no form required, trustinsights.ai/power questions for the pair process. We also have the pair URL. I'll just put that in here at some one of these days. That is a explanation of why we're doing this. All right, so we've gotten Gemini's own internal guidance about how to analyze an API. Next, I'm going to say, hey, here's the API overview. I'm going to upload to Drive. And from Google Drive, I'm just going to take that big old plain text file of the front page from Hexdocs, and we're going to let it chew on this massive document, which is 192,000 tokens. So that's about 100. So deduped and digested down, that's what, about 150,000 words of just this page deduped. And it says, hey, this documentation is the Google Content Warehouse presents a vast and complex system with numerous interconnected modules. Modular structure, module interconnections. And then it starts listing out all of the system components in here. Focuses on Google products and stuff like that. Debug, overall picture. This is useful. This is a helpful summary. Say, can you make a list of all the major model interconnections? I want to know what those model pieces are, because this is going to tell us at a high level, or it should tell us what the big chunks are, what the key modules are in this package. Let's see, we have abuse and verdict. This could be a while.
So, the topic of today's episode is, how to build a marketing plan. I'm imagining that this leaked documentation is going to radically change our marketing plans in terms of SEO, because we've all been doing it wrong.
Exactly. Oh, look. Social graph, social interaction. So remember, Google's been saying for years, we don't take any social media information into ranking at all. It has nothing to do with Google. We don't pay any attention to it. There's social media stuff in here. Weird. We have web documents, indexing, knowledge graph, videos, and media. Okay, that's pretty cool. That's pretty helpful. I want to know, dig deeper into the social modules. Google has said for years that social media data is largely ignored. Is there evidence within the API documentation that indicates Google is working with social media data, especially from third-party social networks. This is the power of generative AI. We don't have time to read through 150,000 words. That's, for context, Anne Handley's book, Everybody Writes, is 75,000 words. This document is 2 of these. That's how large this is. We don't have time to read through that, and you'd probably need like 5 Red Bulls just to be able to deal with it. While it doesn't explicitly reveal significant integration with multiple social platforms, both Google's own and third-party ones.
I like how it starts with, "You are right to question Google's statements."
So Google Plus is still baked in there. IDs, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, family status, hidden key fields, third-party app support and end types, YouTube comments. This contradicts Google's public statements about ignoring social media data, raising questions about transparency and the actual extent of social data usage within their own system.
Aye.
So I guess that's
so I guess the question, so what do we do? What do we do? I'm so I just, oh my God.
The red pill.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of questions we had. So let's ask the question based solely on the documentation. What can we conclude about inbound links, right? Because we've been hearing about inbound links. Are they important? How important are they? Google has also made the statement over time, like, yeah, it's just one of 200 ranking signals. Focus on building good, great content. That's been sort of the refrain for 20 years now. And to be clear, that's not wrong advice. Like, you should still have content on your site that doesn't suck.
Sure.
However, I think some things are more important than Google has said. Based on hex docs, we can conclude that inbound links to a website, also known as backlinks, play a crucial role in Google systems, impacting several aspects of the functionality. Here's evidence from the documentation. The existence of a dedicated anchors module indicates the importance of link data, signifies a centralized system for storing and processing backlinks. Detailed information. Hey, look, there's PageRank that they said has been gone. There's a statistical analysis module. There's representations. There's scoring signals. There's boosts for user data, for user interactions with the data. So this is really interesting. You mentioned boosts, and it looks like there's something called demotions. From the API documentation, and you'll note I keep saying from the API documentation. I'm telling Gemini, do not infer other stuff from your general long-term memory. Focus only on the data that I have given you, to force the model to focus just on what we've provided, because otherwise it will hallucinate. Make a list of the boosts and demotions in the Content Warehouse API, understanding that we have the modules, but not the model weights. One thing I think is important to say is this documentation is essentially sort of the model dimensions, if you will. If you're familiar in Google Analytics, you have dimensions and metrics. Metrics are the numbers, dimensions are the categories. This documentation is essentially the dimensions. We don't know the weights. We don't know how much each feature counts for, but the very existence of a feature indicates that there's at least some numerical value to it. So this is kind of like saying we know all the variety of ingredients on top of the pizza. We just don't know how much of each ingredient there is. But for sure, if pepperoni is listed, there's probably pepperoni on the pizza somewhere.
So I think depending on your role in the organization, digging into specifics of the document makes sense. So I want to know more about social, or I want to understand more about, the anchor, or, the boost. Is there, like, can you directly ask Google Content Warehouse to say basically, like, what are the 10 things I am supposed to focus on? Is that the kind of information you can get from this particular leak documentation?
Absolutely. In fact, I wrote a prompt over the weekend that does exactly that. And it goes like this. We divide SEO typically into 4 areas of practice, right? Technical stuff is infrastructure, server speed, on-site, things you're doing with aspects of the content itself, like schema, markup. There's off-site stuff like inbound links, link building, and then there's content like the quality and quantity of the content itself. Given this general framework, relying only on the API documentation, let's build a list of SEO best practices from the documentation in these categories. Return your best practices in an outline format because we want it to be easy to read. And this is a critical part of the prompt. Provide specific module or function calls as supporting evidence from the documentation. This will reduce hallucinations substantially because Google has to reference its own data. If no supporting evidence from the API documentation exists, omit the best practice. So again, we're saying we want to focus just on the things that are in the documentation. So this is exactly where you're going, Katie, which is we have this big ball of data and we turn it into something actionable. Can we turn this is the so what of this document.
This is the so what. Yeah. Well, because you're talking about Google has been hiding how search actually works. And the number one question we get from clients is, how do I improve search? And so, I'm sort of speaking in general terms, but they don't care about what's in the documentation. They don't care about, they just want to know what they need to do that they're not doing or stop doing that they are doing so that they can get better search results. It's frustrating to everybody to think that we're putting so much of our blood, sweat, and tears into, well, what is AI going to do to search? And how do I get better search? And search is my primary channel and I only have budget for search. And everybody's doing it wrong.
And so we have, and by the way, with Gemini, the current version of Gemini renders in markdown format, which is super handy and super nice. And so what I'm going to do from today's show is I'm going to put this markdown format, I'm going to render it as a PDF, and we're going to put it up for free in the Analytics for Marketers Slack group. So, and if you are a member of that group, totally free to join. Go to trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. And after today's show, that PDF is going to be in the analytics community. No other registration, just got to sign up for the community, and you will get a copy of Gemini's analysis of the Google leak. So our results are technical SEO, fast load times. I mean, we knew that's useful. Use structured data markup. Yep. And it specifies which modules. Optimize title tags. Right? And that is interesting because title tags is one of those things that we have thought for years. Google has tried to essentially eliminate things that we can do on our site to influence rankings. And it turns out that actually matters. So title tags have clear, relevant, well-formatted title tags. Use unique content. The presence of shingle-based analysis and shingle info per doc data suggests that Google identifies and potentially penalizes duplicate content. Google has been saying for years, go to Webmaster Forum and stuff like that. Go to their channels saying, oh, there's no such thing as a duplicate content penalty. There's a duplicate content penalty.
Especially with generative AI now, people using it to write content. They're like, oh, it doesn't matter. It matters.
It matters. It says so in the documentation. There's a duplicate content penalty. Provide accurate business information. So this is one of the interesting things in here. Your Google business pages, there's a whole separate section of the content warehouse that specifically deals with Google Business, that seems to have an outsized weight on everything else. And what we see this in Google's AI answers, right? The demos they gave at Google I/O a little while ago said, hey, here's all these things that AI knows about your business. It turns out Content Warehouse really prioritizes your Google business listings. So if you don't have one because you're like, oh, we're a virtual business, we don't have offices, you need to set one up. And in the case of Trust Insights, it's probably time, later on today for us to go and look at our listings to make sure that they're up to date. But clearly that matters. Build high quality backlinks, authoritative sources, prioritize backlinks with high anchors, source type sources, relevant context, avoid spammy backlinks. Okay, that's not surprising. Content SEO, create fresh and engaging content. There's the freshness we were talking about earlier, Katie. Freshness is in there. Focus on relevant keywords and topics. Quality salient term sets, salient terms and content. Ensure content readability. Okay, I have a question. Talk amongst yourselves.
Well, and so, John, this is something that, you look into. So this is saying, high quality backlinks. Maybe I've been misunderstanding, but I thought that basically domain authority didn't matter anymore. So it sounds like it does. Like, how does that change the way that we're approaching things? If, like, I guess the first question is like, okay, so if domain authority matters again, how do we get good domain authority? And then how do we make sure we're getting links from it?
Yeah, that's another one of the things that came out of this was, yep, there's absolutely domain authority. Even one of the other ones that was crazy, there was some stuff about author reputation. Like if you're a certain person writing on different sites,
Mhm.
you can get domain reputation by getting the right person to write for your site, which
Mhm.
yeah, no, you hit that one. That's another one that we've been told for years that that's not true, but it definitely is the case. And so now the one thing where it does go back to the standard parroted line of the EEAT, right? Just having expertise, authority, that will eventually get you traffic one way or another. So if you've been doing that, then you kind of are working on your domain authority. But yeah, I don't know. There was some stuff about even subdomains, right? Too, and domain names actually mattering, which is another thing that they've said forever doesn't matter. So yeah, there's a lot of shifting going on.
Yeah, there is in fact an actual site authority metric within the content warehouse in the compressed features file format. Interestingly, this goes and says, while it does not explicitly address press releases, because here's my question: Google said for years that press release links don't count. Right? We're going to devalue press releases. They don't count. Don't do press releases. It's not a good way to build links. And yet we know when you publish a press release on a reputable wire service, it shows up on like, WKRP in Cincinnati and all these local news sites, and it shares as release. So like, does this matter? Is that advice true? It turns out there's enough signals and stuff in this documentation that would suggest actually you might want to send out press releases, because the links that you get from local news sites, because this is the emphasis, there's a lot of emphasis on local news and local links, just localized link reputation. Yeah, the news wire itself probably has been discredited, but WKRP in Cincinnati isn't. And so I would put that, especially with what we're teaching people now in our generative AI course. Yeah, you probably want to be doing press releases again. They probably are relevant, and they may have been relevant this whole time, and we were just being lied to. So there's one other thing in here. I might ask it. What is in the API documentation about the overall topic of a site and the content on a site in terms of vectors, embeddings, and vector radius? So one of the things that was mentioned is that Google seems to be able to, it seems to trying to pigeonhole a site to like, this is what this site is about. So if you are writing content that is off topic from what it thinks your site is about, you will rank lower on it. And so when you dig into the documentation, there is evidence that Google is essentially doing vectorization of the content on your site and then turning that into there's a module called site radius that says, here's what, it might say, hey, Trust Insights has been blogging about Google Analytics for 3 years. So we think this is a site about analytics. So when you put up a post about organizational change and organizational behavior, it's not semantically close to Google Analytics. So your content about organizational behavior is going to do less well. So it's sort of saying, I want to pigeonhole you into, you're about this. So if you try and broaden your interest, we're going to penalize you for doing that because you're not aligned with what we think you should be. And so here we are with a new and improved SEO guide that is based on the documentation. And again, this is a very large document. So using generative AI is the way to go, and using it in a way where it is just, of the 6 use cases we talk about with generative AI, it's all about, this is summarization and this is extraction. Extract the relevant information from here and then summarize it into a useful working guide. So that's what's in this massive model. And so now, from a marketing planning perspective, you now have an SEO plan. So this particular channel.
Mhm. Well, and I think that that's really the key takeaway. So yes, we could, bash Google for another few hours around how they've, done us wrong as marketers. Like that's just not cool. But they're Google, so they're going to do whatever they want to do anyway. The real point here is that, to summarize, Chris, you're using generative AI to take really large technical documentation about how Google search engine works, how it's actually factoring your content to rank it. And you're saying, give me a checklist of what I as a marketer need to do. And so now savvy marketers who not only sign up for our Analytics for Marketers community to continue the conversation, but go there and get the resource that we're going to provide based on this analysis, they can now start to get that competitive edge over other marketers who aren't paying attention to what this leak means for their SEO.
Exactly. And I want to emphasize this. You don't need to wait for leaked documents. As much fun as this is, you don't need to wait for leaked documents to be able to do this, because it turns out that most technical companies in most places publish a lot of information. And if we are clever, we will figure out ways to make use of that. So let me switch gears here. I'm going to pull up a new instance of Gemini. Let's call this LinkedIn algorithm. We know that there are a lot of people on LinkedIn who are talking about, hey, here's the secret to getting your stuff noticed on LinkedIn. And we're pretty sure that those folks probably don't have the secret, right?
Well, if they're telling everyone, it's no longer a secret.
Well, yes. The first rule of Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club. I'm gonna switch off all the safeties and things as we usually do for these sorts of exercises. Here's what we do know. LinkedIn publishes a really good, very technical blog, the engineering blog. And in this engineering blog, which is now like 15 years old, they have posts on pretty much everything that they are doing from a technical perspective, right? Because the goal of this blog is to attract engineering talent. So there are things like Flight Interactive, building public groups, how to prevent abuse of the system, recommendations, how people you may know works, etc. What if you were to glue together all of these blog posts and, like a detective, say, find me the little nuggets scattered throughout all these posts about how LinkedIn works? And what if we could assemble a set of protocols and practices from what LinkedIn has said publicly? So we're not making stuff up. We're saying we know the secrets are in here. We just don't have time to read all 83 pages of blog posts.
Well, and I'm guessing that that's maybe their intention, is they're like, no, we totally put it out there for everybody, but they're not assuming that, the non-engineering and non-technical marketers are spending their time reading that information. But then they can claim like, no, it's there. I don't know what you're complaining about. We just didn't put it together in such a way that you could understand it. And we gave you bits and pieces all over the place, but like it's there.
Exactly. It is there. And so what we're going to do next is we are going to take a assortment of 77 of the blog posts that I thought were most relevant about how LinkedIn makes recommendations. And we're going to feed this into Gemini to say, okay, let's see what's in here. So great. Here are 77 blog posts from LinkedIn's engineering team about the way LinkedIn's technical architecture works. Synthesize and create a broad outline of content from these blogs specific to LinkedIn's news feed and how LinkedIn makes decisions about what content to show. Be sure to reference specific technologies, algorithms, and platforms as supporting evidence for your outline from the blog content. So we've got our prompt. Let's upload from Drive. We're going to go into and drag in those 77 blog posts. Now, I will say the part we're not going to show here because it's boring is I wrote a piece of Python code to just extract blog content. So I don't have to hop and paste manually because that's just a pain. So we have
But to
100.
note, that is something you can use generative AI to assist with.
Oh,
Is
absolutely.
generative AI is really good at writing code. But again,
Absolutely.
not part of today's episode.
Right. So let's see what we got here. LinkedIn's newsfeed, a deep dive into content decisions, overall architecture, 2-pass ranking system. First pass ranker gathers candidate updates from different sources. Second pass ranker combines and ranks FPR outputs into a single personalized feed. The follow feed, timeline-based indexing, RocksDB storage, content ranking and selective, multi-objective optimization, utility function, Bayesian optimization, candidate selection, deep learning for feed ranking, factors in influencing ranking, dwell time, skip prediction, embeddings, personalized embeddings. That's interesting. Fairness and equity, transparency and explainability, supporting technologies. So we've now got a really good technical summary of what LinkedIn does behind the scenes. So as we did with SEO, we say, great, this is a good technical summary. Next, based on the blog content and your outline, citing specific technologies, algorithms, and platforms where appropriate, put together a guide for social media marketers of best practices from the engineering content to increase the likelihood that their content will be seen and featured in the LinkedIn news feed. Okay. Let's see what happens. So now we're going to take the technical stuff and boil it down to useful practices. This may take some time.
Well, I think, so a lot of the software that we use has that engineering documentation. I know Meta has their engineering documentation, which covers Facebook and WhatsApp and Instagram and a lot of the other platforms. Even our marketing automation systems, our CRM systems, they have technical documentation that most of us just skip. We don't bother reading it because it's so long, because it's so technical. And what I really like about this approach is that now we can take the documentation that tells us exactly how things work and put together that punch list of, okay, I'm a non-technical marketer with this technical documentation. Just tell me what I need to know. Tell me what I need to do so that I can then confidently say, I'm now doing it correctly.
Exactly. So the recommendations for social media marketers: understand the 2-pass ranking system. You want to capture attention quickly and signal relevance. Leverage follow feed, build your network and post consistently. Staying fresh. Follow feed has a freshness component. Drive engagement. Prioritize content that sparks conversation. Ask questions and encourage comments and shares. Consider dwell time. Viral actions, likes, comments, and shares are highly valued by the ranking algorithm. Aim to create content that resonates, prompts those actions. Be timely. Respond to comments and engage in discussions. Prompt feedback to creators is a ranking signal. So not just responding, but responding quickly to things. Harness the power of embeddings. Include skills relevant to your target audience. Your hashtag strategy. This is something you've talked about in the past, Katie. Use relevant hashtags to increase discoverability. Avoid spammy behavior. Pay attention to your analytics. Consider your target audience's activity patterns. The time of the day matters. So if you're using social media management software like our friends over at Agorapulse, that they produce time of day analysis, you may want to refer to that to see if it works. Optimize for mobile and engage in relevant LinkedIn groups, the redheaded stepchild of LinkedIn. John, it might be time to dust off the marketing over coffee group.
There's 7,000 people hanging out there looking for a party, and if there was a link from there to get there, it would be great. But yeah, it is amazing how that has just kind of been left in the garbage bin.
Exactly. So now we have our documentation powered SEO strategy. And now we have our documentation powered LinkedIn strategy. So we've got two great marketing plans from the mouths of the vendors themselves.
Well, and I feel like this is a good opportunity to make a plug for the 5 Ps, because just because the documentation exists doesn't mean that the software is necessarily relevant to you. So I can see this becoming almost like an overwhelming obsession for marketers to try to figure out every single system, how to game everything based on the information. But you really still have to focus, because now we have what, like 10 very specific steps we have to follow every time we build on LinkedIn. So the question is, where does LinkedIn fit into our overall, business plan? So what is the purpose? What is the question we're trying to answer? Is LinkedIn part of that? Do we have the team to follow all of these steps, to the T, so that we can say we're doing the thing? What is the process? Platform being LinkedIn, but you also have to create content. So it's not just I'm posting, random gibberish and nonsense. The content still matters, and then you can measure the performance. And so I want to bring that up because, we're talking about Google search and SEO. We're talking about LinkedIn. There's other technical documentation out there. So the question you have to ask is, does it matter? Is that a platform I need to care about? Therefore, I'm going to go through this exercise to figure out how exactly my results are the best shown, how I reach people, and therefore, because you're adding more stuff onto your plate. You're not taking away, you're adding. So it's not enough to just post something on LinkedIn and say, oh, well, it did or didn't perform. Now you are armed with the knowledge of how it works. So you have to follow all of those steps. You've just given yourself more things to do.
You have. However, the great thing about these tools is that if you have a template for your own internal standard operating procedures, your
Right.
next step would be to do this analysis and say, okay, great. Now I want you to take, second pass fine tune ranking from the LinkedIn documentation. Here's our standard operating procedures template. Write out a standard operating procedure for our marketing coordinator on LinkedIn to follow that will where the activities are optimized for that specific part of the algorithm. So again, we've got this great source of knowledge, and we've got these amazing language models that can translate one thing to another. We can have them translate into our standard operating procedures. Say, here's exactly how to do this. And then it's like printing your own cookbook. Like, here's the recipe. Here's the recipe for your LinkedIn every day. Here's your recipe for your personal brand. Here's your recipe for your LinkedIn group. Here's your recipe for your optimizing your content on your website. That's what's so powerful about these tools is they're not just analysis tools. They are creator tools to help you make those standard operating procedures.
The first thing I would probably do is take my existing standard operating procedure and say, okay, great. You've just given me this list of things to do. Update my SOP with this new information, and then hand that out for everybody to follow. Or if for some crazy reason I don't have an SOP, I could then say, great, you've just given me all this information. Help me put together a standard operating procedure that I can hand to my marketing coordinator and have them follow, like a checklist that I can hand to John Wall, our chief statistician. And he's going to get marketing over coffee, like, up in the stratosphere now.
Exactly.
Get Google to love us again.
Exactly. And to your point, Katie, going back to the 5 Ps, if you have performance, if you have marketing goals you need to reach, your next step would be to take your existing marketing planning documents, your marketing strategies, your marketing tactics, and bounce them off of these summaries. Say, okay, we know organic search is 48% of our traffic or whatever. We know that we have to generate X number of leads from organic search this year. You go back into that Gemini instance and say, here is our marketing plan. Adjust this marketing plan with the knowledge from Google's content warehouse so that our tactics and our execution plans and our operating procedures are aligned with what's in the documentation, but also aligned with the business outcomes we care about.
Great. John, final thoughts?
I don't know. I'm still, heartbroken that Google's been lying to me for all these years. So I need time to adjust and take this in.
You and me both.
The good news is that not only is the truth out there, the truth is in here now, in generative AI and in our Slack group. So we will share that information there. That's going to do it for this week, folks. We will talk to you next time. Thanks for watching today. Be sure to subscribe to our show wherever you're watching it. For more resources and to learn more, check out the Trust Insights podcast at trustinsights.ai/TI podcast and a weekly email newsletter at trustinsights.ai/newsletter. Got questions about what you saw in today's episode? Join our free Analytics for Marketers Slack group at trustinsights.ai/analytics for marketers. See you next time.